This is what happens when OBS updates and it decides to forget all of your input devices. Yeah. Yeah. Mime stream. 2 words. Sounds like evil Black Death enemy. I was saying, welcome everybody to a special edition of Adventures in History where we do History of Middle-earth, which is everybody's favorite Earth because the bad guys always lose and the good guys always win, right? Except the last time we did this when it was talking about Turin. This stream will be somewhat more positive, I guess, though it is also very sad. We're getting to the end of the First Age in Tolkien's Legendarium, and things get pretty rough at the end of the First Age. But let me say hello to everybody. Moose, good to see you. Welcome in. DCI, 24-hour stream. I've considered doing that for fundraising purposes, and when we get back from our trip next week, I'm going to put serious consideration into doing something like that. Globulus, Globus, not Globulus. Globus, welcome in. Tad, good to see you. Tuna, what up from vacation? Calm Heart, welcome. Moose2271, welcome in. Very animated, sure. The best of Marcel Marceau, right? The last stream was the edgelord dude who changed his name 15 times. Close enough. Turin, who named himself several things. The bloodstained son of the wronged, master of fate. That last one is Turambar. Turambar is usually what he gets referred to, as opposed to any of the other ones. Well, just don't forget that if you missed that one, there is the VOD for it. There is, if you go to my channel and click on videos, you can go to collections, and I've collected all of the History of Middle-earth streams, so you can go back and watch that one if you want to. You haven't been able to find the Smithsonian on Middle-earth yet. Yeah. It is not neat vodka because it's got ice in it. So if anything, it would be vodka on the rocks. But no, it's actually just water. I just got back from a birthday party, which is why I'm late. And it was my nephew's birthday party, but we frequently combine my nephew's birthday with my wife's birthday because they're about a week and a half apart, but they're close enough that we sort of put everybody together and sing and open presents and do all of that stuff. And it's good to see all of my nieflings, and they're ultimately really good kids, and I have a good time hanging out and being Weird Uncle Shane. So, it's one of the things that comes with the territory. But that's why we're starting off a little bit late. But we have a lot of interesting stuff to go through tonight, and specifically we're coming again to the end of the First Age of Tolkien. They're good kids until they're your students in a remote access class. No, because I could tell my sister that they were bad and she would straighten it out. So they would be good kids anyway. They're all actually rather smart for their age. I feel a lot of affinity with my oldest nephew. He's a kid after my own heart. So hopefully when he gets older, I'll be able to get him into stuff like Lord of the Rings and things like that. We've been through way worse, Moose. We would be able to talk to each other like adults. I actually had a really good conversation with my sister today. A really good conversation. So Anyway, where we left off, many things had happened in Middle-earth. The element of the story that we were covering is broadly described as the children of Hurin. Tolkien considered there to be sort of three main stories of the First Age. We've covered two of them now. The first one chronologically being Beren and Luthien and their story that we talked about. Then Children of Hurin, and then the fall of Gondolin, which is what we'll wrap up with today. But what's actually interesting is that the fall of Gondolin was the first of the stories that he started writing. And today, at the end of the stream, we will get to actually the first character that Tolkien ever created in Middle-earth, a guy named Erendil, who is referred to as the Mariner. And we'll talk more about him when we get there. You'll also hear that horrible screeching in the background. We are puppy sitting my in-laws' dog Pearl, who you've seen on stream before if you've been around, but you'll know that she barks at literally everything. So if you hear someone, or if you hear something in the background that sounds roughly like someone pulling a cat over a carburetor that's, spewing hot radiator fluid, I know that doesn't necessarily work, but it's a bad noise. That's Pearl. She's a small, fluffy Balrog. Without wings. That's accurate. No wings on that Balrog. We'll talk about Balrogs tonight. But anyway, at the end of our last story, there was a fateful moment where Hurin, having been released from the clutches of Morgoth, returned a Silmaril to Thingol, who is the king of Doriath. And if we want to look again at our map, this is our map of the First Age. And again, the First Age map does not look the same. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on the next stream on History of Middle-earth edition 11. We'll basically collapse all of this into the sea. But that's the most ants dog name I've ever heard of. Yeah. Are there pictures of Pearl as part of the stream on Balrogs? No, there are not actually pictures of Pearl. I don't think I could even call her. She doesn't really obey when called. But we've got a couple of things going here, and specifically we're going to be talking a lot about two locations tonight. And this big central kingdom right here is called Doriath, and this was one of the kingdoms of the elves in the First Age. It was ruled by a guy named Thingol, whose wife was actually a demigoddess named Melion, and I'll show you pictures of them in just a second. But we will be talking about them. They were the last known kingdom, meaning that Morgoth knew where they were. But the reason Morgoth could not attack them is because of Melian's magic. Melian, being a Maya, had certain magical powers and was able to protect the realm of Doriath from assault from enemies. But there was one other kingdom that was hidden, and that is this region right here, the kingdom of Gondolin, which was ruled by a guy named Turgon, who was basically the last big king of the Noldor. The Noldor were a particularly powerful branch of elves who had been the biggest and most powerful foes of the big bad Morgoth. So Morgoth knows that Gondolin exists, but as you can tell here, it's hidden in what were called the Encircling Mountains. And Morgoth did not know how to find Turgon, and Turgon had a great army of elves hidden in this valley and the big city here of Gondolin, which we'll show pictures of later. So these are the two big kingdoms that are going to be the centers of our story tonight. And specifically, we're going to start here in Doriath with this guy who is Thingol, who again is the king of the kingdom of Doriath, and this Maiar, who is his wife. This is Melian. Now, when we talk about these particular two individuals, let me get my notes. So this is Thingol and Melian. So they are the king and queen of Doriath. Now, they had received a Silmaril. Now, if you know that there's a book that is sort of the history of a lot of this stuff, all of these stories are recorded in a book called the Silmarillion. You'll know that there were 3 of these. One of them had been retrieved by Thingol and Melian's son-in-law, Baron, who was a human, as a bride price to marry their daughter, who was Luthien, who was the most beautiful elf on Earth. Now, there had been a lot of stuff that had gone through all of this. The Silmaril had moved around. It had been changed hands and kept in different places. But anyway, it gets delivered to Thingol. And if you want to know why, you can go back and watch History of Middle-earth 9 to catch up on all the backstory. But what ends up happening is that Thingol has this idea. He has this really beautiful necklace that had been made by the dwarves, and he decides that he wants them to attach the Silmaril to the necklace. And this particular combination of Silmaril and dwarven necklace becomes known as Noglamir. Now, this is a very beautiful piece of craftswork, and it is considered to be the most beautiful work of creation at this point.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Fidelia, thank you so much for being Spartacus. And 22 months of support. Been here since the beginning, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So the Noglamir, Spartacus of Middle-earth, right. The Noglamir is a beautiful work of art, and everybody wants it. And this is where things are going to get a little bit squirrely, because the dwarves make this at Thingol's request, but then they decide, you know what? We really don't want to give it to you. Like, we've given it to you, but like we want it back. We sort of don't appreciate you claiming this as your own. There are a lot of there are a lot of hurt feelings when it comes to how the dwarves look at who owns an item. And if you've ever read something like Harry Potter, a lot of the ideas that J.K. Rowling uses for goblin-made items is very similar to how Tolkien basically addressed dwarven items. So they would make them for a particular person, and that person would pay a particular fee to be able to use that item for their life, and then at the end of that person's life, they were sort of expected to give that back to the dwarves. I would say that was a precious item to them. And so much so that the dwarves are going to attack Thingol. And his kingdom, Doriath, was ruled from a palace that was referred to as the Thousand Caves. The elven word for that is Menegroth. And in one of the lower and more secluded caves, dwarves attack Thingol and kill him. And they take the Noglamir and they make a break for it. Now, as soon as this happens, of course, the dwarves get a decent head start because they're doing this sort of under subterfuge. But the elves of Doriath find out pretty quick and give chase, and they kill all but two of the dwarves. The two dwarves who get away get back to the dwarven city of Nogrod, and they complain to the leadership that Thingol had insulted them, and that's why they had killed him. Now, this was a bit of a misconstruction of what actually happened. The dwarves had demanded that Thingol turn over the Nonglemir necklace. Thingol had basically told them to go shove it, and then the dwarves had taken offense and killed him. It wasn't like he just insulted their parents or said something bad about their kids or something like that. It wasn't out of nowhere. So the misconstruction is sold off as the truth, and this greatly angers the dwarves of Nogrod. Now, the leadership of Nogrod go to one of the other big dwarven cities, a city called Belagost, and they say, we should make war upon the elves. And we should really, we should go and bring the hurt. And the city of Belagost doesn't really buy into the whole narrative. They sort of smell that there's something up here, so they don't join in. But the dwarves of Nogrod are going to prepare for war. Now, meanwhile, all of this is happening back at Doriath. Melion is absolutely distraught. Now, if you've been with us since the beginning of History Middle-earth, you might remember a very touching story, but briefly, when Melion and Thingol, whose name at that point was Elwë, first locked eyes with each other, they literally fell so deeply in love that they were sort of caught in a time loop. They fell so deeply in love that their love pulled them kind of out of time. And they stayed locked in this gaze for quite a long time until they sort of came out of this and then were immediately like, yeah, we're totally going to, make a kingdom together and be forever in love. So when Thingol dies, Melion is just absolutely distraught. And she decides that she can't live in Middle-earth anymore, and that her time amongst the elves is over, and she seeks a ship to the undying lands of the West. And when she gets there, supposedly, there's not really a clear story that confirms one thing or the other, but it's said that she sought the halls of Lorien. Irmo Lorien was one of the Valar, who was basically a keeper of lore and a contemplative god who had a region that was a very beautiful garden that was good for thinking, and Melion went back there to sort of deal with her grief, according to at least some of the stories. We don't actually know 100% what happened to Melion. But with Melion gone, the kingdom of Doriath was opened to attack, because when she left, her magic went with her. And that is going to leave Doriath open for attack. And when the dwarves of Nogrod show up, they are able to march directly into the woods, and they take the capital of Menegroth unawares and by storm. And there is a great battle in the Thousand Caves, and it is a brutal one where many elves die, many dwarves die, but the dwarves are initially going to get the upper hand, and they are going to sack the treasury and once again recover the Nonglemir necklace. Now, on the way out of the capital, they make a rather poor choice of pathway, because they decide to leave through a particular region where where one of our big heroes lives. So this is one of my favorite pictures of Baron, who at this point was the only human who had ever come back to life. Such a great story, wrapped up in a lot of personal imagery between Tolkien and his wife Edith. If you missed that episode, you should go check that out. Yeah, this was a very sad time for Melion, who had lived for time untold, for thousands of years with Thingol. Before there was ever even a sun in the sky, she had been with him. Back during the time of the stars, she had been with him. And their love was a pretty powerful one. And when he was gone, she sought his spirit, right? Because the elves have mortal bodies. I said that poorly. The elves have bodies that can be killed, but their spirits are immortal. So when an elf dies, they are sort of transported in spirit to this part of the Undying Lands called the Halls of Mandos. Mandos was another one of the Vala, and he was the Vala of basically fate and doom. One that spoke great words of prophecy, and he was the gatekeeper basically of the spirits of the dead. And there are some, not particularly in world people, but like if you ask modern people that really like Tolkien, a lot of people will say, well, Melion just went to the Halls of Mandos to hang out with the spirit of Thingol and be reunited him in the Undying Lands. And elves could come back to life with physical bodies and everything, but that's a whole other story. And me even saying that would make some Tolkien people a little upset, because that's still a bit of a bone of contention. But we'll talk about a guy who I think came back to life at the end of the stream today. What's up, Cliff? Good to see you. Welcome in. Welcome in. Anyway, Baron, this guy, was living in the woods with this beautiful young elf named Luthien. So Baron and Luthien had basically done the unquestionable and unthinkable. They had recovered a Silmaril. They had defeated death. They had cheated Morgoth, and their story is a great one. One of the big stories of the First Age. But when the dwarves are leaving Doriath, they're sort of loaded down with all this treasure, and they have the Noglamir necklace, which has the Silmaril on it. And they decide to go through the area where Baron and Luthien lived. So Baron, collecting a group of outcasts from Doriath and some of the elves from the region, elves of Osiriand, are going to waylay the dwarves and set upon them very suddenly and kill just about all of the dwarves and recover a lot of the treasure and recover the Noglamir. Now, the chief dwarf of their party puts a curse on the basically the collected wealth of Doriath, and as a way to try to break the curse, Baron has all of the treasure dumped into the river. This is actually a pretty interesting theme that pops up in both Tolkien's work that he copied from earlier Germanic and Anglo-Saxon concepts, where you can break a curse by submerging stuff. So if you look at the hide of Smaug in the Hobbit, where he gets shot by the black arrow and falls and crashes into the lake, and the jewel-encrusted hide is down at the bottom of the river, at the bottom of the lake, and people will sort of swim down and steal a jewel or something like that. That's the same kind of concept. This is something that George Martin copied with the shattered breastplate of one of those guys that gets hit in the chest by the big hammer, and all of his breastplate scatters into the river. That's the same sort of thing. It's a trope in Germanic and Anglo-Saxon literature. So, hate to ruin anybody's idea that came up with that unilaterally. They didn't. Anyway, they get the Noglamir back. Now, Beren and Luthien had gone through a lot, and Beren is going to give Luthien the Noglamir. So when this happens, Luthien, who by all accounts was the most beautiful elf and the most beautiful living being on the entire planet, put on the most beautiful piece of jewelry containing one of the most beautiful jewels. This sort of has kind of a simpatico effect, and the region around their home became basically supercharged with positive energy, and everybody that dwelt nearby enjoyed years of peace while Luthien wore the Silmaril. And this was too beautiful for mortal lands, right? That makes it cooler. Love hearing about the origins of these ideas. Well, I know a lot of them. So if you ever have any questions like, hey, where'd that come from? I could probably give you a pretty good idea. I know a lot about Tolkien stuff. Passing every single vibe check. All right. So what's really cool here, this is literally considered by some people at the time in the world to be almost too much good. And when Luthien won back Beren's spirit, there was a deal made that basically she had to give up her elven immortality. If she was going to go back with Beren to live, she had to live as a mortal. And she did so willingly because it was her man, right? But they had both lived very, very long lives. And their son, whose name was Dior, had already been born. He had married a beautiful elven lady named Nimloth, who's referred to as Nimloth the Fair. And they had 3 kids already. So Beren and Luthien had been around a very long time. They were into their old age. And they died pretty soon after. But what's interesting here is that some people say the reason that they passed away so quickly upon receiving the Noglamir was that
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
KP, thank you so much for being Spartacus. Yes, everybody said that Luthien died because she was Spartacus and she joined a slave rebellion and then got crucified by the Romans. Indeed. 3 years. It's a long time, and I appreciate the support, my friend. It's good to see you. So anyway, some people hypothesized at the time that Luthien died more quickly because it was too much of a good thing. That someone with her level of beauty and grace and skill possessing the Silmaril attached to the Noglamir, it was just too much for mortal lands. That they basically burned the candle too bright too fast, and she may have been able to live longer had she not received the necklace. But anyway, that's an interesting story. Now, this here is a picture of Dior, who is their son, and his wife Nimloth, and they have 3 children, as you can see. We have 2 sons down here. It's really almost impossible to say which one is which. Illured and Elurin are their names, and the young daughter here is Elwing. And these are going to make a decision that it's their job to kind of go restore Doriath. Now, Dior was actually the heir of Doriath, right? So Thingol, king of Doriath, has a daughter, Luthien. And so Luthien's son, Dior, would have claim to the throne of Doriath. Baron and Luthien weren't really interested in ruling a kingdom, but Dior says, you know what, I think I can do that. I think that I can reestablish Doriath. I know that Melian, my mother, is passed to the Undying Lands in the west, but there are still many elves here that are good with bow and spear and sword, and we can drive out the enemy and we can reestablish our kingdom. So Dior actually goes back and for several years reestablishes the kingdom of Doriath. Now, this is where things are going to get a little bit sideways. This, by the way, is the year 502 of the First Age, when Dior goes and reestablishes himself as king of Doriath. The next year, in 503, Luthien and Baron are both going to die. And Dior knows this because he receives a message and a gift. And the message is basically in the form of this gift, and the gift was the Noglamir, this necklace with a Silmaril on it. And he knew at that point that his parents were passed away. And if you see in the image here, he is wearing the Noglamir as a sort of a symbol of his office. Now, this is where things are going to go sort of sideways. And this is going to call back to some of the earlier stuff that we've talked about, but the Silmarils were the creation of an elf named Fëanor. Getting a Silmaril as bling, it's good to be the king. Absolutely, right? It's one of the coolest things literally on Earth. There are only 3 of them, and you've got one, and it's around your neck. And the big bad has the other 2, so, you know. Anyway, Fëanor had created the Silmarils, and Morgoth, the big bad, had stolen them. And upon the theft of the Silmarils, Fëanor and all 7 of his sons had sworn an oath that no one other than Fëanor or his house could hold the Silmarils. So it's a problem that Dior has it, because he's not supposed to. He's not of the house of Fëanor. So one of the sons is this guy named Celegorm. Celegorm is going to go to his other 6 brothers and start up a lot of flack. And the head brother was this guy named Medros. Do I have a picture of him? I mean, I do, but I don't think I pulled it up. Anyway, Celegorm is going to rile up all of his brothers and all of their kingdoms, and they sort of send a very direct letter to Dior, and they say, give us the Silmaril or else. And Dior's response is, yo, you all have had literally thousands of years, well, not thousands of years, hundreds of years to try to recover one of these or any of these. And my mom and dad went and fetched this literally from the crown of Morgoth when you all were sort of sitting around with, you know, your thumbs in orifices. No, I'm not giving this back to you. As you might expect, this is a big problem. So the sons of Fëanor are going to mount up a war party, and they are going to attack Doriath. And this is what's referred to as the second kinslaying. And what's really telling here is that the first kinslaying was also by these same people, and also because someone would not aid their recovery of the Silmarils. The first kinslaying was back in the Undying Lands of the West, when the Teleri, who were another branch of elves, refused to give ships to the Noldor, who were trying to sail to Middle-earth to recover the Silmarils. So the Noldor just killed all of the city of Aqualande and stole the ships and sailed across to Middle-earth and then burned them so that nobody could return. Very dark, very bad point in elven history. right at the beginning of the First Age. Well, technically that happened before the First Age started because the sun hadn't risen yet. But that's a whole technicality, and you can go back and watch the VODs if you want to get into all the specificity of that. Anyway, so this is the second kinslaying. Yeah, you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to tell us no. And this one's pretty bad. The 3 of the sons of Fëanor are going to die. Celegorm and Caranthir and Curufin. Celegorm actually gets killed in combat by Dior, who then goes on to get killed himself. Nimloth, the queen of Doriath, and Dior's wife also gets killed. And the sons of Fëanor find his sons, Elred and Elurin, and they abandon them in the woods of Doriath without food or water. They basically turn them out into the night. They don't kill them directly because they're children, but this is very clearly meant to be their end. And after this happens, I guess to some of his credit, I don't know how much credit you can give him, the eldest son of Fëanor, Maedhros, tries to go out and find the kids, but is unable to do so, and somewhat repents of the action, but still with that oath thing. So, yeah. Now, you might go, what about the daughter? Well, their daughter escapes, and Elwing is going to escape down the river Sirion and get down to a region in the very deep far south called the Havens. And if we go back to our map, so here's the river Sirion. It runs basically all the way up from the most northern parts of Middle-earth all the way down. You can see down here the mouths of Sirion. This region is where Elwing is going to retreat with some of the faithful of Doriath. And remember this particular region because we'll come back to that area again by the end of the stream, because we are, like the waters of the great river, we are moving all things towards the same destination. But in 503, when all of this stuff happens, Doriath is permanently abandoned, and there is sort of a great loss of faith between a lot of the elves. The sons of Fëanor had gone from 7 down to 4, and the killing of elf by elf is looked upon very, very negatively. And a lot of the elves that had not gone over to the Blessed Realm, initially speaking, so these are the green elves, are going to feel sort of bitter about this, and rightfully so. And they're going to feel rather betrayed. These Noldor showed up and they brought all their trouble with them, and they cause all these problems, and they end up killing everybody, and they wreck the kingdom, and there's a lot of hurt. And some of this shows up in the Lord of the Rings, where you can kind of tell that there are different flavors of elf, if you will, and they don't all necessarily immediately get along. Because there are some legitimate grievances between the branches of elves. For example, when Legolas shows up at Lothlorien, there's a little bit of a it's one of those wood elves from the north, because Lothlorien would have been home to a lot of the Noldor, and Legolas's dad, Thranduil, was a king of the elves of Mirkwood, but they would have been green elves, not Noldor. So there's some lasting long-term hurt there. And of course, the stuff that's happening in Lord of the Rings is almost 7,000 years after this, but elves are immortal, right? So you can carry a grudge a long time if you don't die. Anyway, so that's unfortunately the end of Doriath. Now, switching to another kind of sad story. We pick up the story of a human named Tuor. That's Dawn. Tuor, son of Huor. What's a few millennia among foes? Yeah, Yeah, sure. You can hold a grudge that long. It's easy to keep generational grudges when that many greats grandpa is still alive to tell the story. Also fair. Not many of the Noldor left, though. I will say this. Nimloth, right? I mentioned Nimloth, who's the wife of Dior, was a cousin of Celeborn. And you go, okay, well, who's Celeborn? Celeborn is Galadriel's husband. So when they go to, when the Fellowship of the Ring goes to Lothlorien, and you see the king and queen of Lothlorien, that's Celeborn. His cousin was Nimloth, who got killed by her own family. And that's kind of a jerk move. So, not the greatest. No, wait a second. Celeborn, no, they wouldn't have been family. Celeborn married into the Noldor. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting myself twisted a little bit. I'm getting my elf lore backwards. If you ever feel underappreciated, just remember that Galadriel was married. That was something that was a purely, well, you know this, but I'll call this out. The underplaying of the role of Celeborn was a movie trope. It is not done that way in the book. So it's obvious that Galadriel was an older and probably more powerful elf when it comes to what Sam might call elven magic. Of course, she did possess the ring, but Celeborn wasn't a slouch. He was a legit ruler in his own right and had many a deed attributed to his lineage. So that mostly because the book is more fair to a lot of characters. And if you get Kate Blanchett to play Luthien, I'm sorry, not Luthien, Galadriel, you're going to have to pick somebody really big to try to stand up on the screen with her, and they didn't really have enough time because that movie was crammed enough as it was. Anyway, and they still didn't do Bombadil, so sorry about that. Moving along. Who is Tuor, son of Huor? Well, he's who he is, but Huor is in the same family as Hurin. So we talked about Turin, son of Hurin, children of Hurin, in the last story. Tuor is his cousin. And Tuor is interesting as a figure because he represents all three lines of men. So there were three different houses, if you will, of the Edain. These were the early men. And through his lineage, Tuor is related to all three of them. And I find that to be a really symbolic and very interesting fact, mostly because of who his kid is. But we'll get there in a little bit. But suffice to say at this point that Tuor is not just symbolically representative of all of the good men who had fought on the side of good, but he's literally related to all of the good men who had fought for the side of good. Now, he is not going to have an easy life. He is going to grow up without a father. His dad, Huor, had died at a big battle called the Nirnaeth Arnodiad, which was the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. His father had fallen protecting Turgon. Turgon, again, was the king of Gondolin, who had shown up to try to aid his Noldor friends. But Huor died, saving Turgon and allowing Turgon to escape. And Turgon considered that a big deal. The very... not necessarily ominous in a bad way, But as Huor was dying, he sort of looked at Turgon and said that a star will rise from our lineage that will reshape the face of Middle Earth, and omens and deaths, declarations and things like that have a lot of weight in Middle Earth. And Turgon took those words to heart. So Turgon escapes, gets back to Gondolin uncaught. Of course, then Tuor actually is born after the battle. His mother was this lady named Rion, and she gave birth to him after his father had died. And Huor, being gone, is going to put his wife and son in a bad spot, right? The Easterlings took over the region of Dorlomin, which is where they lived, and Tuor is going to grow up as a thrall, basically a slave. And he lives in such a way for a few years, but manages to escape, and is going to basically go rogue for a while. He's going to run around in the woods and grow up fighting the bad guys very quietly in stealth. He does grow up to be a pretty strapping young lad, but he's living off the land, and he's being very crafty in his wood skill and all of these things. Anyway, he's going to eventually get to the point where everybody kind of knows that he's out there, right? The Easterlings know that he's out there. The Easterlings had given him a hard time because they understood his lineage, that he was sort of tied into these ancient great houses of men, and they had given him a lot of flack for that. But Tuor had heard the story from his father, well, not from his father, but from some of the friends of his father and from his family, that there were elves on the east coast. Elves on the western coast, and he wanted to figure out how to get over to them. And he thought, if I can just get to the elves, then I'll be in a better spot because they'll know who I am. They'll help me in my fight against these Easterlings. And this is going to be a pretty interesting moment here because this kid's got some big fate. And he is going to be led by these urges and these sort of visions and dreams by the god of the seas, Ulmo. And eventually he's going to find two elves, Gelmir and Arminus. Arminus. It'd be Arminus. Anyway, and Ulmo is going to tell these elves, get him to the sea. This is important. Just get him to the sea. So there is an interesting moment here where Tuor, as a young man, actually gets to view the sea. And you go, okay, what's the big deal about that? He's the first human to ever lay eyes on the sea. And this is a pretty momentous picture here where he's standing on the sort of the precipice overlooking the ocean, and the seabirds are flying around him, and he hears the waves, and he immediately gets this sort of this longing for the sea, which is something that a lot of people attribute to Tolkien's time as a young man. Right after his mother died, he was able to basically be fostered by a couple of people, most notably one of the priests at the Catholic Church that he attended. And one of the things that he got to do was go out to this region of England that's called the Lizard Coast, or the Lizard Peninsula. And young Tolkien sort of looked out onto the edge of the water and got really struck by that sort of that imagery, the waves and the rocks and the water and the birds crying and stuff like that. So there's a lot of imagery wrapped up here, not just with Tuor being the first human to see it and feeling this longing for the ocean, but some of Tolkien himself gets wrapped up in the story. Now, what's really, really interesting here is that Tuor is going to get led to an ancient city called Vinyamar. And Vinyamar was originally the home of Turgon. When Turgon's family and court made their first kingdom, they made this great city built into the walls of the coast. And they had this great, beautiful city called Vinyamar. And Ulmo was the one that told them to secretly prepare Gondolin and showed them how to get into the encircling mountains and told them to move there secretly. But all the way back then, and this was hundreds of years beforehand, before Gondolin was ever founded, Ulmo had told Turgon, leave some armor and a sword here, because eventually I'm going to send someone to tell you that it's time, and I want you to know that they are my emissary, because they're going to have these arms and armor. And Tuor gets led to Vinyamar, and he finds this shield and this helm and this sword, and he puts them on. And at that point, there's a big storm. Are you not entertained?
Is this not why you're here?
DJ Jaina, thank you so much for the raid. It's good to see you, my friend. It has been truly too long, and I hope that you are doing super well. Everybody go follow DJ Jaina. Great streamer friend, variety streamer. Always good vibes, though. Lots of different content. Always the good vibes. The Atlanta Thrasher, welcome on in. I have not seen your pants, but if you need help finding those, there might be some aid that we can give. Where were the last place you've seen your pants? Welcome in, everybody, from DJ Jaina's stream. My name is Shane. Normally, you would find me here talking about history, or perhaps building one of these lovely plastic Gundam kits that I love so very, very much. But because we passed 1,000 followers, we get to do a History of Middle Earth stream. And we do one of those every time we pass 100. So this is the 10th one that we've done, signifying 1,000 followers. And we're talking about Tuor, son of Huor. This is in the first age of the Tolkien Legendarium. This would be going on in the 490s of the first age, if you're keeping track of time, because I know everybody has all of this stuff memorized, right? They went out to get milk and cigarettes 20 years ago, and they haven't come home yet. Oh man, that's unfortunate. Well, they do make other pants, and I'm sure that there are other pants that would love to be your pants. And even if those old pants didn't particularly like you very much, I'm sure that there's a pair of pants out there that will fit you and give you that snug, good, comfortable feeling that you're looking for. Don't give up hope that one day you might find your old pants, but it's okay to buy new pants. History of Pants, episode 19, right? Cancels his therapy session. Happy to help, Atlanta Thrasher. Good to see you. Welcome in. All right. So we're getting to a good part of the story. Atlanta Thrasher, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome to the adventure. You've never even seen if Shane has pants. I have pants. I wear pants. See? Look, pants. I'm not wearing shoes, but I do have pants on. Yeah, that was a realistic interpretation of Harrison Ford de-aged doing the whip, right? Hello, Kaylee. Do you want to come up here and see me? Do you want to come and see me? Come here. Oh, you want to come over on this side? We've got a puppy sighting. Come here. Come and see me. Come and see me. Come on. Oh, yes. Here's the puppy. Here's the puppy. What are you doing? Hello, Kaylee. Oh, she had to endure a bath yesterday because she was getting stinky. Which means that she had to get combed out today. And my wife took her out on the porch and combed her out and got like about a grapefruit-sized ball of fur just from brushing out the puppy. She's about 20 pounds lighter. Not 20 pounds. The last time I brushed her out was an enormous amount. I think it was like the last little bit of the winter coat that had just massed under there. But she wasn't as bad as I've seen it before today. But that's the puppy. And yes, the puppy emotes abound. She's really why people come watch the stream. Anyway, here's Olmo. And Olmo reveals himself to Tuor, who is wielding the sword and the shield left by Turgon. And Olmo gives Tuor a message and says, here's the deal. I'm going to lead you to Gondolin. And you need to tell Turgon that he needs to abandon the city and go down to the havens at the mouth of Sirion. And Tuor's like, "Whoa, man, that's a pretty heavy message. Are you really going to entrust that to me as a human?" And Olmo goes, "You're carrying the sword and you have the shield, and I know who you are, and Turgon will know who you are. He's not going to doubt that you're legitimate." So around this time, actually this is maybe a jerk move, I don't know. Remember, because Olmo is showing up in the middle of this big storm. Well, in the middle of this, there just so happens to be a shipwreck, and there's an elf in the shipwreck. And he kind of hears Olmo talking to Tuor and goes, I actually know where Gondolin is, and I can lead you there. So did Olmo purposely wreck this guy's ship? I don't know. Is that a jerk move? I don't know. He's a god, so maybe. Anyway, so the shipwreck elf just happens to be there at the right time because of the storm that the sea god caused. Elf ex machina, right? And just so happens to know where the most guarded and secret realm of elven kind is located. So can take Tuor to Gondolin. Here, by the way, is a pretty cool picture of what Vinyamar would have looked like. Again, so this is the old city of Turgon, the kingdom of Vinyamar, built on the cliffs of the ocean. Random elf. I like the cut of this guy's jib. I'll lead him to the most hidden place on Middle-earth. Well, you know, God did say so. Olmo is always a friend to the Noldor. He had been pretty good to them, even though he could have been a pretty big jerk to them. But anyway, yeah, he had been responsible for helping out a lot. But here we see Tuor wearing his elven armor, surrounded by swans, but he is headed to this place. Beautiful picture here done by Alan Lee. This is the hidden city of Gondolin. And there are secret ways to get into it, and there are many gates and lots of guards. But basically, Tuor is going to crest this mountain and see the white city of Gondolin before him. And this is a big deal because it gets drawn a lot. This is the same scene as drawn by Ted Naismith, another very famous artist of Middle-earth art. So I like the way that Gondolin looks here because this looks way more like it's sort of, I don't know, kind of built on a cloud, which is just, and neither of these are bad. But I do like that this particular one shows the entire Vale. So this region in the Encircling Mountains was called Tum Laden, and Gondolin was actually just the city itself. So I do like that you get sort of a broader view of what the valley looked like. And this gives it a bit more sense of enormous size as well. But anyway, Tuor is going to get into Gondolin, and he is going to be led to the throne of Turgon, who is the king of Gondolin, who, according to one artist, is this dashing fellow. Again, if you don't like the way that any of these pictures look, as always, you can imagine these characters however you want them to be, right? Because only some of these pictures are authorized. So, like, this is an unauthorized picture, but I actually kind of like it. I think that looks Turgonish. Turgonic? I think Turgonic would be the correct adjective there. Wishes for Shane Review's Bad Middle-earth art stream. Green Herring, I don't necessarily want to tear anybody down, right? If people do art and put it on the internet to make other people happy and to make themselves happy, I find that completely edifying. I don't necessarily want to spend a stream like negatively reviewing art. Because you never know. You never know what that meant to the person. You never know what that meant to the people that they did it for. And I definitely can't do it. So, maybe if there's like a person who's objectively a jerk and treats everybody poorly and then also does bad art and does bad art specifically for nefarious purposes. Like if you... if you can show me somebody who sells prints of AI-generated Tolkien art, I'll trash that all day long. So, that's Shane in the 80s. No, I never had hair that long. You realize that Rings of Power is technically bad Middle-earth art. How much have you heard me talk about that on stream? Right? I didn't watch it. There's my official statement on it. Anyway, so I don't want to get sidetracked talking about Rings of Power. I will say that there is plenty of criticism that can be leveled at Amazon, both as a company and for ethical things that they have done. I don't think all of Rings of Power was bad. My biggest gripe was a lot of the changes that they had made in characterization that were not what I've wanted. But anyway, we're not going to get too far into that. Mostly because I stopped watching it. So that should tell you enough. Anyway, there are a lot of people that love that. So if you love Rings of Power, love it. Do your thing, man. Good on you. Not my job. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Anyway, Turgon receives Tuor. And he's like, look, I've got a sword and a shield, and Olmo sent me. And Turgon's like, oh, that's a big deal. So what did Olmo tell you? And Turgon is sort of like quaking in his little elf boots at this point, because a message from a god is either going to be really, really good or really, really bad. Like, you don't get messages from gods that's just like, he said sup, right? Um, he said, "How you doing?" You're not going to get just small talk from a deity. And Tuor delivers this message. Almost says, "You should abandon Gondolin and take your armies down to the havens at the mouth of Sirion." And Turgon goes, "Yeah, I don't like that. That's a bad call." And I think Olmo might be wrong on this one. And Tuor's like, "Well, no, I mean that's what he said." And Turgon has kind of a moment here where he does something a bit prideful, and this is sort of one of the go-to moves for the Noldor, and that is, I trust too much in my own ability. I have a little bit of hubris. And Turgon goes, no, we'll be fine. If there's a bunch of bad guys hanging around, what we can do is we can just shut everything down, right? We will not allow anybody in or out of Gondolin. And that'll be fine, right? We'll be okay at that point. If we just shut everything down, nobody knows where we are, they can't come in and find us, we'll be okay at that point. But that's not what Olmo told them to do. So Tuor, of course, at this point can't leave. But he's actually kind of okay with that, because he had found the elves that he was looking for. Being the descendant of Huor, who had saved Turgon's life, he was given great honor, and he was a warrior, right? Because he had sort of been duking it out on the borders in the woods by himself, so he knew how to fight. He was a strong, strapping dude, so he gets actually put in charge of one of the sort of guard units of the city. And this is when he's going to run afoul of a guy named Maeglin. Maeglin. Now, this is Maeglin. Now, who was he? Well, Maeglin was the son of Eol. And Eol has a nickname, or an epithet, the Dark Elf. Because dude was sort of whacked in the head and had already caused a lot of trouble in Gondolin, and had been killed by being thrown off the walls of the city, because he was he had committed a whole bunch of crimes and was tried and found guilty. But Maeglin, being a child at the time, had and Turgon's relative, his nephew, had been allowed to stay in Gondolin. So Maeglin at this point was an adult and did not like the idea of a human being in command of elves. And Maeglin does not like Tuor at all. There's also another side part here. And that side part is an elven lady named Idril, who I'm realizing that I don't have a picture of, and that's on me because I forgot to get a picture of her. Idril is Turgon's daughter, so the princess of Gondolin. And Maeglin has a crush on her, even though they're first cousins. And Maeglin had asked Turgon to marry Idril, but he had been told no, because that's like that's way too close. Like you're way too related. That's not a good idea. So Maeglin had the hots for Idril in the first place, and then here comes this man who is an equal to just about any elf in skill and battle and stature, who gets put in charge of one of the...
I'm Spartacus!
Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Grathar, good to see you, my friend. It has been a while, and I hope that you are doing well, as always. Thank you so much for that subscription. Always lots of support, going back into the good old days, back at the beginning of the stream. How are you, my friend? Hope you're doing well. Anyway, Tuor kind of has an eye for Idril himself. And Tuor approaches Turgon and says, I would like to marry your daughter. And Turgon says, yeah, that's actually kind of cool. We could totally do that. So Idril and Tuor get married. Now, Idril reciprocated the love. This wasn't completely arranged marriage kind of world here. Idril liked Tuor and found him, to be a wise but also, just and powerful leader of men and elves. So it was a good match. But when they get married, this does not sit well with Maeglin at all. And he starts sort of plotting. And he decides that he wants to sort of build his own army to go accomplish deeds. But, you can't leave, right? The order had gone out. You cannot leave Gondolin. We're basically locked in. Well, Maeglin doesn't follow the orders. He starts sneaking out, and he starts going on patrol, and he's specifically looking for supplies, and he's looking for metal deposits so that he can forge a cache of weapons and armor. But he gets caught by the bad guy, and he gets dragged in chains before Morgoth. And this is a bad spot. You do not want to be dragged in front of Morgoth and questioned. And Morgoth finds out who he is, and as soon as he finds out who he is, he starts asking questions about where Gondolin is. And Morgoth ends up getting the location of Gondolin from Maeglin. And as a way to ensure that Maeglin will act as a spy, Morgoth promises Maeglin that when Morgoth conquers Gondolin, Maeglin can rule the city, and that Morgoth will kill Tuor, and Maeglin can have Idril as his wife. And Maeglin agrees to these terms and is released and sneaks back into Gondolin. Now, immediately, Idril notices that something is up. And Idril is like, Maeglin, you've been gone for a while. What were you up to? What were you doing? And Maeglin was like, I was scouting, and we were on vacation or whatever. And Idril kind of has this like back of this head spider sense kind of thing and goes, there is some shenanigan crap going on. So secretly, Idril has a tunnel constructed that leads out of the valley and into the mountains. And very, very few people know this, and only people that are trusted in the sort of household care of Idril and Tuor. Because this is like real dangerous, right? There is only one way in and out of Gondolin according to everybody except for, the people that know about this one tunnel. But Melkor / Morgoth, the big bad, doesn't attack immediately because he wants to make sure that when he does attack, it's a killing blow. So he starts breeding orcs, and he starts bringing about the massing of dragons and trolls and balrogs. And after a certain amount of time goes by, Morgoth decides to launch the attack. Now, this is done very slowly and very methodically, because even though Morgoth knew where Gondolin was, he didn't necessarily know how many soldiers Turgon had, and he knew that being Noldor, these weren't your average pushover elf soldier. These were going to be highly skilled, highly trained, very well equipped, very powerful elves some of the most powerful elves in Middle-earth would be at Gondolin, including those that had lived in the Blessed Realm, had seen the faces of the gods, that sort of literally radiated power. These guys would be the enemies. So he wants to make sure that when he does this, he does it right, and he does it all in one big thing. So it's also worth noting that he would be assaulting a city that had big walls and gates, and his forces would have to climb the mountains to begin with. So he sort of moves in very, very slowly and lines soldiers and orcs and dragons and balrogs and trolls around the edges of all of the hills, and then launches an attack on Gondolin in one big swoop. This is an overwhelming amount of baddies, and we're talking some of the biggest and worst of the baddies. We've got the captain of all Balrogs, this guy named Gothmog. This particular image is Gothmog fighting one-on-one versus the former king of the elves, Fingon. But, big old scary Balrogs, the banes of the elf kind of the ancient world, right? Gothmog himself is going to be there. There are dragons, and there are orcs, and there are all sorts of really, really horrible siege weapons that can fling fireballs into the city. This is a picture by John Howe, another sort of, but not sort of famous, another very famous illustrator of Middle-earth art. Hoping that there might be some evening shift weeks in the near future now that the busiest season is starting. Oh, that's cool. Evening shift is when you get to sleep a little bit later and hang out here and stream, right? Anyway, Gondolin is going to hold out for days, even against this massive onslaught of big bads. And there are just the songs go on, right? There are so many epic deeds of valor done in the defense of the city. It's a big battle, and even with, again, dragons and balrogs and orcs and all these soldiers, the city holds and holds and holds. But it's sort of like it's inevitable that this is the end of Gondolin. But you get these amazing stories of Turgon fighting to the death, surrounded by literal hills of the slain enemies that had fallen to his blade. The captain of the fountain, this guy named Ecthelion. Now, I should note here, this is an elf, a Noldorian elf named Ecthelion. If you know anything about Denethor from Lord of the Rings, you know that Denethor, who is the steward of Gondor, is son of Ecthelion. That was a man, not the same guy. Again, there's about 6,000 plus years of difference between what we're talking about right now and where Lord of the Rings would have happened. So Ecthelion just becomes a name of a powerful warrior, and Numenorians and later people from Gondor pick those powerful elf names up because, I mean, wouldn't you want to name your kid after some great powerful warrior like Ecthelion? Anyway, he was the captain of the fountain. There's this big, beautiful fountain that was in Gondolin, and the captain of the fountain was sort of like the head of the armies, sort of your commander of the army, right? So you're like your joint chief of staff kind of guy, right? Anyway, he is going to end up in one-on-one combat with Gothmog, the captain of the Balrogs. And they fight and they fight and they fight, and they both end up getting disarmed. Not like their arms get chopped off, but the sword gets blown away, and Gothmog's axe gets thrown away. And Ecthelion has a spike on the top of his helmet, and Gothmog is kind of standing there, like, kind of dazed. and Ecthelion runs at him and lowers his head and runs that helmet spike into his gut and knocks Gothmog into the fountain, and then basically grapples him in the fountain so that Gothmog can't get back up and get air anymore. And so Ecthelion basically sacrifices himself to drowning to take out the captain of the Balrogs. This great story of stuff, right? Maeglin, the traitor who had given away everything, is going to start looking for Tuor and Idril because he wants to kill Tuor and kidnap Idril to be his wife. And Tuor and Maeglin are going to get into a big fight on the walls of the city, and in what can only be sort of described as ironic turns of events, Maeglin gets thrown off of the walls of the city just like his dad did, and he dies crashing into the ground at the base of the wall. And Tuor and Idril are able to make their escape with some of their household and some of the guards of the inner court. So basically Gondolin is falling all around them, and then Idril goes, I have a way out. I sort of suspected Maeglin was going to do something like this anyway, so I have a tunnel prepared and we can get out of the city. So Idril leads all of this band around her to the tunnel, and they make their way out into the mountains. But again, Morgoth had been prepared. He didn't want anybody to be able to escape. He didn't really want anybody to be able to sort of slip between the cracks. So even though this great host of foes had been sent down into Gondolin, there were still enemies lined up in the mountains. And when the last survivors of Gondolin kind of pop out of the tunnel, there's a Balrog sitting there waiting for them. And there's another Alan Lee piece of art. What we have here is a Balrog with his big whip of fire, and he is being charged by our buddy here named Glorfindel. Or Glorfindel, whoever you want to pronounce it. And there's a great battle. Glorfindel is a very powerful elf lord. He's one of these that had seen the Blessed Realm, that had just immense amounts of sort of battle power. Gotta sneeze. Sorry about that. Anyway, so there's a great clash of arms, and the Balrog ends up getting slain and thrown down the mountain, but Glorfindel gets wounded to the death. Now, this is the interesting point. If you've read Lord of the Rings, you will know that there's an elf named Glorfindel. And specifically, if you read the story, this is the elf who rides the white horse Asphalloth that manages to find the Fellowship on their way into Rivendell. Now, I know if you've watched the movie, they're found by Arwen. That is not book accurate. That was them trying to squeeze another way to put Liv Tyler into a scene. But Glorfindel is one of these powerful elf lords. And if you read the first chapter of book 2 in Fellowship of the Ring, you'll know that Frodo comments to Gandalf that when he looked back across the river, he saw this figure blazing with light. And Gandalf goes, yeah, that was Glorfindel, because he's an elf lord who has been to the Undying Lands. And he was basically going at the Nazgul uncloaked. So full out, like, powerhouse. But here's the question. If Glorfindel dies fighting the Balrog to save Idril and Tuor, how is he alive then in Lord of the Rings? And this is actually a debate that a lot of people get into in the sort of deep Tolkien world. I will tell you what I think, and I'll tell you what other people think. I think it's because he got reincarnated. This is something that is not that big of a deal if you read Tolkien closely and interpret it in the right way. This happens a few times, and specifically in the period of time where the Valar were sending the Astari, who are what we would call the wizards, to Middle-earth to help them. They send Glorfindel back with a particular task in mind, and I think that was to marshal the forces and help aid in the defense of elven kingdoms in Middle-earth. So again, elves have bodies that can be physically killed, but their spirits are immortal, and they go to the halls of Mandos, and they can be reborn either in the dying lands or get a body back and then get sent back to Middle-earth with a mission from God. Does that make Glorfindel a blues brother? I kind of think so. I've not often joked, but I have joked before that if they were going to ever make another Blues Brothers, they should do Blues Brothers Middle-earth, and it should be basically Gandalf and Glorfindel on a mission from gods. But, that's a little bit too meta, and I doubt that the Tolkien estate would be very happy to do so, to make that happen. But I think it would be goofy. Gandalf definitely smokes enough. He would be Jim Belushi's character. And Glorfindel would be roughly equivalent to Dan Aykroyd's character. I think. You can make your own opinions. But anyway, what we're looking at here is an interesting discussion about how death happens. And if we look at how Tolkien's influences play into his stories, a lot of the stuff that he drew from were these Icelandic sagas, specifically ones where death isn't the end, right? And this is actually something I was talking about with my wife the other day. When you die in Midgard, in what we might call Viking mythology, you basically die in body, but then you get to go to Valhalla, which is another plane of existence, which isn't that bad, right? Because it's cool. You get to fight and drink and, cuss and party and goof off, and that's kind of what you do for all of eternity. And in certain versions of that, you have these particular figures that are called Einarjarin, who are basically the honored spirits of the dead that show back up in the land of the living to protect people or do deeds to defeat monsters or to right wrongs and stuff like that. So I know that Tolkien would have been familiar with these sort of stories like the Einarjarin or Valhalla or things like that, because he taught about these things and he read these things and tried to convince his friends to learn Old Norse, Icelandic, so that they could read them in the original languages. So he knew about this stuff. I don't think that it's too far to suppose that Glorfindel in the Third Age that we see in Lord of the Rings is the exact same Glorfindel that died in the mountains saving Idril and Tuor as they escaped from Gondolin. I don't think that's a stretch at all, and I think that we can draw a lot of good lines between them. Now, Idril and Tuor are going to be the parents of an individual named Arendil. This is a picture of him when he is much older than he would be at this particular point. Now, Arendil is a really, really interesting individual. He is obviously half elven, and he is going to represent both the lines of the elves and all three lines of men. Because again, his father, Tuor, was was descended from all of the different main houses of the Edine. Arundel is going to be particularly important in our next story. He's going to be basically the prime mover in the last stream of the First Age. But at this point, he was a younger kid, and the group from Gondolin is going to follow Ulmo's decisions and in council, and they make their way down to Sirion, to the havens there. And this is quite a few years after the fall of Doriath. And what we end up with is Arundel meets Elwing, who was the last survivor of Doriath, who had with her the Noglamir necklace and the Silmaril. And Elwing and Arundel are going to be really important to the story. But that's next time. Now, before we completely cut, I do want to note, Arundel is actually the first character that Tolkien ever created to put into the world of Middle-earth. Now, this was very, 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 very long time ago in Tolkien's life. This was more than, well, not quite 50 years before Lord of the Rings was published, but a long time before Lord of the Rings was published. And in the original version of the story, Arundel was a mariner who basically got lost and went on an odyssey. Tolkien had this idea that he wanted to create a northern odyssey. You know, the Odyssey with Odysseus is sort of a Mediterranean thing, where Odysseus goes to all these areas in the Mediterranean, but Tolkien wanted the same sort of thing for England, and he wanted this northern mythology to sort of all be connected by Arundel. But that's a long time. I'm going to need for just a minute to put up the intro screen, but I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Craziness. I did think on the way down the hall that instead of it being Pearl Puppy, that's a Balrog. Small dogs that make loud noises should be called Howlrogs. Thought that was a pretty good pun. That was worthy of relating. But anyway, specifically here about Arendelle. This guy becomes sort of the center of Tolkien's early work, and he's the main character in the first written work, which is a poem about Arendelle. And the word itself, Arendelle, his name, is actually an Anglo-Saxon word that refers to the morning star. And Tolkien envisioned this story of Arendelle going through this odyssey and encountering all of these foes and defeating all of them, and then literally sailing his boat off the edge of the world and into the heavens and literally becoming the North Star. And this was a big attempt at Tolkien at a way of kind of blending together the Celtic and the Germanic and the for lack of a better word, Norse or Viking history of England into one big story, having this set so far back in time that all of these characters sort of interacted with each other, and there were different periods of time, and the story of traveling off to the west was a big part of it, and it was a really interesting whole world. And if you want to read about some of this stuff, find me in the Discord and poke me or some stuff like that, and you can just Google all this stuff and look it up too. But anyway, at the end of our story, Gondolin falls. Tuor and Idril and Arendelle and several of the members of the household get down to the Havens. Arendelle meets Elwing, and they're gonna strike it up pretty quick. And by our next story, things will be set in motion that literally change the face of the planet, which it's pretty earth-shattering. And I say that with absolute literal accuracy. The world literally gets shattered and broken and remade. But that is all of the material that I had planned tonight for History of Middle-earth. But if you all have questions about any of this stuff, or if you specifically just have questions about anything Tolkien related in general, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, we can start looking at who's around to see to whom we're going to give a raid. So thanks everybody for coming out. Hope you all enjoyed the material. This is again one of the third of the three big stories that Tolkien considered to be the keys of the First Age histories. So there's that. So anybody have any questions? Is anybody even out there? Otherwise, let's see who's around and we'll see who to go raid. I always wondered what's the significance of all the different gates of Gondolin. So this is that's a great question, Cliff. So when you read the Silmarillion story, there are all these different gates. There's like a gate that's white, like pearl or marble, and there's this gate of gold and silver. These are supposed to call back to several things. One of them is a trope that the more gates a city has, the more important it is. So this goes back to kind of like the ancient world, right, where some cities boast that they have all these big different gates that you get into as a way to say, like, look how big our walls are, look how populated our city is, that we have to build this wall that has all these multiple gates into it. So there's some of that. This goes way back to maybe even like biblical stuff. We know that Tolkien was really big on reading the Bible, and even though he hated allegory, it's pretty obvious that some of this stuff ends up having an effect on him. You can't necessarily discredit anything like that. But the specific seven gates were all designed to have symbolic meaning, right? Your different things like your purity and your defense and your strength and etc. And they get harder as they go. So like the first one is just a wooden gate, which you might expect on any city. And then you have stone and bronze and iron and silver and gold, right? And then steel. So this is representing the progression of time, right? We start off and we make stuff out of wood, and then we progress to the Stone Age, and then we have the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age, and then we go through, and we end up at steel, which is, you know, sort of like the apex of our power. So those progress in that particular way, kind of on purpose, but there's a lot that kind of goes into the symbolism for all that stuff too. Thanks for the stream. It was nice to catch the Lord of the Rings before heading to work. All right, Grethar, good to see you. Have I started the Tolkien lectures? I have not yet. Those start in July. I'm still in the process of trying to do research to make sure that I'm doing them the right way. I have them in place right now where if you told me, hey, Shane, tomorrow you have to give all 4 of those Tolkien lectures, I could go and I could do them, and I would do a really good job at them. But I'm a perfectionist, and I decided that I needed to bone up, and I needed to read some books. I needed to do some additional research. So I've been reading 3 or 4 hours a day, doing research and trying to construct more data to pull those lectures from. And specifically right now, I've got this book right here by me because I come in here and do my work. This is a really great book. It's called Tolkien and the Great War, Threshold of Middle-earth, and it is written by John Garth. And if you are a fan of Tolkien to the point where you want to know more about his actual life, this book is excellent. Shout out to Cave Geek, who gave this to me as a thanks for letting him crash on his way out to Arizona. He heard me mention this book on stream and then gave it to me as a gift. Good guy, that Cave Geek, and much appreciated because it has been incredibly valuable. I've really appreciated this one. John Garth wrote another book that's called The Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien that I just got through reading. It is also incredibly excellent, and I've decided that I need to go back through the letters. In the late 70s and early 80s, Christopher Tolkien, who was John Ronald's son, sat down with Humphrey Carpenter. Humphrey Carpenter was the only person to ever do an authorized biography of Tolkien. And the two of them edited a whole bunch of Tolkien's letters into a big collection, which I have. And I've decided that I need to go back through those with the ultimate goal of producing as full of a Tolkien person timeline that I can make. Right now, the master timeline, let me open that up. So right now the master timeline that I have is 28 pages long. So it's basically just like this day this year, this is what Tolkien did, and it's 28 pages long. And I would like to get that as full as possible before I finalize the lectures. But that's mostly, again, me being way too involved. It's technological progress, exactly. You're progressing to the height of skill, right? And Gondolin was the height of Noldorian war effort, and comparing that to World War I is actually very appropriate, Cliff. I do hope that the lectures are going to be awesome. I'm excited about them. And I plan on trying to make those available somehow. I don't know yet. Well, I'll say this. I originally thought that I would prepare them, get them done in May, and then I would present them via something like Zoom or perhaps even an invite-only Discord during the month of June. So finish them in May, present them in June to sort of get feedback and get tweaks so that when I actually gave them in July, I would have them already refined. But I've already figured out that I've got too much research to do to try to get these done in June. So my ultimate goal now is to try to get all the research done that I need to do so that before we get to July, I can actually have them prepared. And, well, again, fully prepared to the level that I'm happy with them. And then after that, I want to either do some actual lectures where I would not do this necessarily on Twitch, but something where I would actually prepare them as real lectures with slides and such, and sell e-tickets to something like a closed Zoom event and do them for the general public. I had initially thought that anybody that wanted to could sign up for them at the university with which I'm giving the lectures, but they've actually they've set it up to where you actually would have to enroll to take the classes, and I don't think that's going to be something that everybody is able to do. So they might be coming in that way after. I've also been encouraged by several people, including my wife and Cave Geek, to turn all of this into an actual online course with something like Coursera or I can't remember what the other ones are. There are several different platforms where you can build a course and then upload them, and people can pay to go through them and set it up that way as a sort of passive way to gain income, which would be nice, right? So they are likely to come to everybody's availability if you wanted to get in on that. But I'm pretty excited about it. There are some other books that I have. I've got about 12 more books that I would like to go through. Because I'm a glutton for the punishment. Some of the stuff I've read before, and some of the stuff I haven't. And it's just me being me. It's the way that I go. If you're going to go hard. Yeah, and one of those is, again, the letters, and the letters is about 800 pages. I've got the letters right here. I don't know if I can reach them from here. Yeah, so this is the letters of Tolkien. And it's a big old honking book. And the font is pretty small in here. Right. So that is 453 pages. And I'd like to go that one. I'd like to go back through this one. This is J.R.R. Tolkien Handbook by Colin Doriath. I've read that one before, but it would probably be beneficial for me to go back through it again. And then, of course, like some of the older stuff, like Unfinished Tales, Book of Lost Tales, Shaping of Middle-earth. But I don't know if I'll have time or opportunity, so we'll see. But anyway, I think it's time to go do a raid. See who's around. Let's see if my friend Neo Realms is still on. Yeah. All right. So we're going to go raid a fellow teacher in my state. I don't teach with him, but he teaches, and he teaches in my state. He teaches art at a high school that's not too far from me. His name is Mr. King. He does pretty cool artwork. If you are familiar with stuff like heavy metal or comics in the 80s, he does a lot of art that reminds me of that. And he's just doing some sketching tonight, and I don't think he gets enough love. So we're going to go raid Neo Realms. Thanks everybody for hanging out and the good questions. Again, I won't be here on Thursday to stream because I'll be at Heroes Con. There's a small chance that I'll stream on Tuesday next week, but I'll be getting back in town Monday next week after being away for several days. So I'm not going to promise anything, but next Thursday we'll have a stream for certain. But until then, everybody, take it easy, have a good one, and let's go give some love to Neo Realms. He's a cool guy. Yell adventure when we get there, and throw some emotes in the chat, and I'll see everybody next time. Take it easy.